Hey everybody, it's Austin Ward for Lettermen Row, joined over here on my right by Tim May, our new this year Lettermen Row contributor. He's also got his own mic today, so this could be dangerous. As we said, we're going to let him just stream of conscious out here in Birm. I'm going to monitor him a little bit. Ohio State opened the season here in the Horseshoe today. 45-21, a win over Florida Atlantic, the debut for Justin Fields, the full-time coaching arrival for Ryan Day. A look at that revamped defense. It was pretty good for a while until those backups got in there and the score got a little bit tighter. But, Sam, I'll just start with you. What's your number one takeaway for what we saw here today?
Austin, it was the best of times. It was the worst of times. I'm talking about the offense. And then they kind of got their act back together. And what got them going again were a couple of scrambling runs by Justin Fields when, they literally lost their mojo after that ridiculous first, 8 minutes of the game. Really. First 6 minutes of the game. As Ryan Day said, he's never been really associated with a game. He doesn't think where they were up 28-0 with 6 minutes left in the first quarter. And so that would get anybody going because by that point, Justin Fields had run for a touchdown and thrown for three? Three, yep. And the Heisman campaign had already started, and then they lost their way. And really, when they lost their way, it was when that number 36, Achilles Leroy, basically popped Justin Fields at the end of a play. It looked very questionable whether that should have been roughing the quarterback, and Justin didn't exactly pop back up, but he did get up. He looked a little bit groggy, but they lost their way there for like 2 quarters. Right, Birm?
Yeah, he got hit a couple times in a row at the end of the first quarter, and then you could see, I think that there was a moment where the offense kind of just got pulled back, and they were like, let's just give the ball to J.K. Dobbins a little bit more, because as good as Justin Fields was, I mean, in that first 8-9 minutes, you just simply can't have him taking hits like that in a 28-0 game, no matter how many reps he needs, and that's the challenge. I mean,
but it is football. You're going to get hit, and there are going to be hits like that.
They had a couple free runners at him that I thought that were eye-opening for Ohio State when you're up like that big, and to have that happen. For me, however, biggest takeaway from that first half, because that's really all I'm counting as far as football game today, was the experiment of the secret of the defense the last 8 months. Something real happened, because the way that those linebackers and defensive backs were moving to the football in that first and second quarter was something we haven't seen here since 2016.
Agreed.
As a whole unit. And I think there was something really special building.
Yeah. And I don't think it really had that much to do with the bullet, Tim and Birm. No, we've made such a big deal out of it over the last 9 months, but I mean, Pete Warner was lining up in the slot just fine and covering guys, and I think that Tim, we talked about him, I think, on the show this week, that he's somebody who might not be getting enough credit for what he can do after with 1 year of starting experience and in this new scheme. But whether the bullet matters or not, I think you saw 11 people flying to the football a lot more often, and that starts with Chase Young, I think, who he looked every bit the part of one of the best players in America today.
Chase Young definitely set the tone for the defense today. But like you just said, I mean, as we talked about this defense, what they were going to be doing as the year progressed, as we talked in preseason, Pete Warner was big in their plans. I mean, I think they consider Pete Warner one of the bullets to be, basically, as they talked about it, with Jeff Hafley and Greg Madison talked about it, and you saw that come to fruition today. And I thought he made some really great plays and was on top of, for the most part, they're really talented defensive end when it was his time. Brendan White, I thought, did a pretty good job on him. He will never forget, by the way, meeting Malik Harrison over the middle. As I asked Malik Harrison, what does that do for you as a linebacker to make a play like that in a game, early in the season? And he kind of basically said, well, it was good for the whole team and all this kind of stuff. But I mean, I'm telling you, that props you up big time and gets the crowd into it. But yeah, I think the main thing that stood out was these linebackers looked comfortable and aggressive doing what they were doing, and that for me, if there was a microcosm on the macrocosm of the defense, it was how were the linebackers going to flow to the ball, etc. And I thought they did, like you said, when the game was in the sling, so to speak, they did a great job.
And I've been saying this, for a couple of weeks now. When you look at the schedule, today was going to be the test to see just how good that defense was going to be, because Florida Atlantic is going to be better offensively than what Cincinnati does next week. So next week maybe a better feel for what Justin Fields, what J.K. Dobbins can do, because today there was one glimpse in that first quarter of how much potential that offense has, and then a little bit of uncertainty. Birm, you touched about the play calling and maybe the need to get out of there, but they're going to have to, I think, play more sound and sharper and protect the football next week against the Bearcats.
Yeah, I mean, that's one area they're definitely going to need to improve on, is just being more consistent and getting Justin Fields time to throw. The offensive line was a little bit a piecemeal thing in the last few months, and I think there was some struggles today, especially in the run game, getting some holes open. I think you wrote earlier this week about how the Jonathan Cooper injury is going to test the defensive line depth, but we had no idea that we were actually going to see defensive end number 2, 3, and 4 not play today, and that changes everything. So, the second team defense that was in the second half was actually the third and fourth string defensive line. So the lack of pressure and that sort of time that Chris Robeson had in the second half to throw a little bit, which is the only time they moved the football, I think that it's going to be very interesting to see what happens going into next week. Cincinnati's offense, as you mentioned, is not going to be as good as Florida Atlantic's. But if Tyreek Smith and Tyler Friday and Jonathan Cooper are not playing, and you're relying on Zach Harrison and Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who played a nice game, but he's still not that guy. He still looks like a 3-4 outside linebacker type, not really an Ohio State defensive end. So that's where I'm going to be looking in the future, because that is a concern.
I thought Cornell did a great job, though. I thought Cornell did a great job considering who knows how long this has been in the making of having to play defensive end.
Feel for him, right? Like we just talked about him being that 3-tech and making that role his own, and now he's a starting defensive end.
But he's about as versatile. He's about the Army Jeep of this defense is the way I look at it right now. But, back to the offensive side, Ryan Day touched on it. Justin Fields had a ridiculous start. And that ridiculous start including hit about 4 or 5 plays on drives that lasted about 2 or 3 plays, which when he had to get in there and make some blitz adjustment calls, et cetera, and he missed. He missed some, and maybe missed a lot. We'll see what Ryan Day says on Tuesday. But the bottom line, that helped stifle your offense a little bit, and then you could sense Florida Atlantic got a little bit of a feel for its own defense, which is new, and they kept some guys at home that weren't staying at home earlier in the game, and like I tweeted in the middle of second and third quarter, they looked like the running game from last year when there seemed to be in the first quarter. Florida Atlantic looked like it was playing with 10 guys on defense. The second, third quarter looked like it was playing with 12 or 13. And that's the way it looks sometimes when you don't block everybody.
And when you know that Justin Fields probably isn't going to keep it because Ohio State didn't want to expose him to the extra shots.
Well, when he got popped by 36, exactly.
Yeah, and so that changes it. And that's what I think is interesting about this week as an opener, is that, Birm, we learned some things about Ohio State, and at times a lot of good things for them. But today was, once they got up 28-0, as much as Day wants to talk about pushing the pedal to the metal, they're just not going to do that. They have no incentive to do that. They needed to see other guys, and then they got in this lull. That happens to coaches. That happens to players. You're going to get complacent, and then you change I think the whole play calling was different. And so you kind of leave today, and you're like, I just look at it for Ohio State as there was a glimpse at the potential, and almost the second quarter doesn't even really matter because that wasn't Ohio State.
I was going to say the exact same thing. All offseason we've talked about how there is a world of potential on this team, but still a lot of questions because we just don't know. And, we saw out of Justin Fields today that glimpse of the potential, but then we also saw the reason why he needs, as Ryan Day said in the postgame, if he could have given him 174 snaps today, he would have, because he needs every single snap he can get. And if you're an Ohio State fan and you're watching that game at home and wondering why is Justin Fields still in the game in the fourth quarter, don't wonder. This season rides or dies on the back of Justin Fields. So it may seem reckless to have him in there in the fourth quarter, but he has to get these reps, because in 3 weeks from now when they go out to Lincoln and have to play Nebraska in a huge game, then they have to come back here in October and play Michigan State and Wisconsin. These games are when those games get won.
Yeah, but man, they've got backup quarterbacks that haven't played, and they've got backup
starting quarterback.
I think one of the interesting things that developed today was Master Teague III, who's been banged up off and on. We understand through preseason camp, got in there and got quality carries, and obviously J.K. Dobbins had that fumble, which Ryan Day didn't like, and it was for good reasons because it set up a score. But the bottom line is they got some guys, some experience everywhere except really at the quarterback spot, except I guess at the end when I was already headed for the elevator. Chuganov got in there for a little bit, but
that's informative too. Chuganov is in there. Does that mean if it had been the third quarter, he would have gone in ahead of Gunnar Hoke? I don't know. It looked like Hoke was out with the second team during warm-up, so I still have no idea what that means. But Master Teague, I think you touched on that. DeMario McCall got a lot of early playing time, but when the game was in the balance and they were in that sort of 8-minute offense, Master Teague was the one they handed the football to.
Yeah, DeMario got banged up, though, on one play, remember? And you know, we'll see how serious that'll end up being for him, but he didn't really play much after that.
What I thought was most interesting is that they put J.K. Dobbins back in the game in the fourth quarter because he basically had sat most of the third, and then he came back onto the field when they're driving to score a touchdown. I'm like, why is he going back in there?
Touchdown.
Yeah.
And he got 2.
Yeah.
In 2 plays, but whatever.
But that's the bottom line. I mean, you need to get him on track for want of another cliche. I mean, you need to get him on track. Hey, by the way, guys, near the end of the game, did y'all see who came from the middle of the field and made a ridiculous interception down out near the sideline? Do you remember watching that play?
Well, it looked like Malik Hooker, but I'm not sure who it actually was.
You some guy wearing number 41. We've never seen him before.
He's not listed in the roster as 41.
Pardon this pun, but he was Hooker-like.
Yeah.
It was Josh Proctor. And
not really a pun so much as a direct.
Yeah. It was a pun. It was a pun because Hooker was capitalized. But the bottom line is, I mean, I'm telling you, eventually, I think that guy's going to play. I mean, that was a glimpse of what this guy's all about.
And it was weird that he wasn't out there earlier in the game to me.
But you know what? You can't play everybody. We were remember when I asked Greg Madison in the preseason, so where does Brendan White end up in this mix if you're starting just a base defense? Well, he ends up as a starting safety is what he ends up being. And tell me today, how many times did they have the bullet on the field? How many times did they call the bullet defense?
I don't know that if I'm just sitting here without any film breakdown. I didn't get the sense that it was ever out there.
I mean, I could say they called the zebra defense, or the giraffe defense, and
because we sat there in the press box, Tim, and we said, well, Pete Warner, he's lined up there on the slot.
He covered somebody one time. He didn't even cover the guy. It was a man-to-man. He covered a guy all the way out to the edge, and you're going, okay, this is what they think of Pete Warner. This guy can play.
Yeah, when you're talking about these guys, like you said, not everyone can play, and I start to wonder if C.J. Saunders is out today and he is on crutches
with a big wrap on his left leg,
and Jalen Gill still didn't play till the final drive of the game. How do all these receivers end up getting into the rotation? So they're really good players on this team, but Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson were out there in the beginning of the first quarter, and Jalen Gill didn't get a snap until the final drive.
Do you remember when I opined that maybe they have too many guys? I mean, remember that? But you're right. I mean, I think what you're referring to there, Bermanology, is I thought, when they were up 28-0, and then, I mean, the game, I thought they still had control of the game. Why don't you play more guys a little sooner? Because a lot of these guys have not played, and it's a big, as Ryan Day said and Bermanology referred to a while ago, you got to get real snaps to find out what you're all about.
They've got one game of it now under their belt, Ohio State, 45-21 win over Florida Atlantic. The Day era is off to a start. Justin Fields' era is off to a flying start. The Silver Bullets look like they are in pretty good shape heading into Week 2 against Cincinnati. We'll have a full breakdown of this game and this whole weekend on Lettermen Row coming from Tim, Birm, Spencer, and myself.
Also, if you go back and watch Letterman Live,
I almost got out of here without it.
There was someone who was asked to give a score prediction, and they gave a score of 45-21.
Was that Beanie?
And it
couldn't have been Birm.
And it was me. Yeah. So I want to make sure everyone knows that if you're really wondering who to trust, it's me.
I almost got out of here without Birm sneaking that in. I tried my best.
As Birm would say, thank God for the ridiculous two-point throwback over the middle play.
He had a fist bump down
whatever
it takes.
I'm
sure. So,
by the way, a shout out to the glue man. Our Spencer, our guy who's shooting video here, because he should always, like I always said, video without a videographer is radio. And but the bottom line is, you're exactly right about everything. We're going to look over this thing 100 times and see different things they could have done better. I'm going to go back and watch it, at home tonight, just because. As good as things were going in this first quarter, how can it just go south like that?
Right. So full breakdown of that coming. We'll have Buckeye Q's, Tim May's podcast next week. More Lettermen Live, Roosters on Tuesday at 4 on Olentangy if you want to see us. So all that coverage that you have come to expect from us and more, we'll be back next week as we wrap up Florida Atlantic, start looking ahead to Cincinnati next week, Week 2 here in the Horseshoe. For Tim May and Jeremy Birmingham, I'm Austin Ward. We'll see you next time.